Normally it just kind of steps on the rubber.
Probably a slip up. Sorry. Oh yeah,
You're going to hurry it around there.
It's spoiled.
Oh, you don't need it?
I have copies of it.
okay. Here comes the dance on in. Ready? I got orders. You need to get to the seat. And I have asked Daryl DeBoer to lead us in an opening prayer. Sure, prayer. Father God, we come before you in this afternoon hour in the quietness of this moment, just to recognize you as God, our God. This family has had a very rich heritage of serving you and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And so in this time we just acknowledge your Spirit with us. And we thank you for the way that you have blessed and taken care of this family, the way you have multiplied us, the way you have spread us around, and all the heritage that we have. And as we discuss that again today, as we make new relationships with some of the younger cousins and that have come here today, and meet them and just recognize that heritage lives on, and we thank you for that. But now we do ask your blessing upon the meal that we have, upon the fellowship, and we give you thanks for it. We are so blessed in this country to be able to sit down in freedom and enjoy the bounty of the country, and don't have to worry about the lack of food and so on. And so we just recognize that also. And we just want to give you the glory and the honor in this day. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Daryl. Well, I think last night, that's a table of new people today. So I'm going to let you folks go first. So, you folks should head for the food line. Yeah, eat. That's what Wolbrink's do best. And Harlan's steak. yours last night. Water will come to your table. If you would like iced tea, or lemonade, or coffee, that will be
That was the third Wolbrink.
If you haven't gotten any food yet, I'd like to go through the line, please.
So you end up with really good stuff. If you read the reviews, it's kind of like, yeah, great service, but it took 3 weeks to get here. Or great service, it was here the next day, or whatever it is. And it's a pretty good place to sort that out. So we'll make sure we've got contact. We're going to ask about this in a second to see what they want us to do with this site.
Mr. Vandenhoek said he is going to pull out to leave us. Does anyone have any last minute questions for Ellen? Go back there.
What was the best birthday present so far?
What was the best birthday present so far? Well, we had a good meal. Well, happy birthday, Alan. Thanks for coming and spending your birthday with us. Okay, I've got Michael to help. Would you want to open your box? I asked Jason if he had plenty of food. He said, heavens yes. So don't be shy. If you have a part in the program, could you go over to the storage room and get your apparel on, please?
Was 1 year old when they left Pella. She had survived a diphtheria epidemic as well as influenza. Well, when they arrived in Harrison, they needed a home. Guess where they lived? I lived alone, so I made room for them. All 8 of them. I opened up my meager home. If I was lonely before, I didn't have time to think about it now. We lived that way for over a year. During this time, before Tiert got his own land, another baby girl named Katie was born. We found room for one more. As I said, I did not enjoy farming. I liked writing the news for the Harrison Globe. My 3 nephews, Wiebe, John, and Foppa Brower, farmed my land. They also enjoyed reading, often sitting up until midnight, reading in the dim light of a lantern. All three of them were bachelors like me. My parents had stayed in Pella. Mother died there some years ago, and then my father made his home with my sister Plancia in his later years, last years. It always bothered me that we never got to see each other again. But it was a long way. In my later years, I moved to Harrison, and the Browers moved to my farm. I left my entire estate to them.
Well, now I have the solemn responsibility of reading Liebert's Vanderspoor's obituary. Our community was called upon to mourn one of its oldest and most respected settlers when Mr. Liebert Vanderspoor passed from this life last Saturday morning. To many, his death came as a shock, as it was not widely known that he was seriously ill, nor was his condition regarded as critical until a day or two before his death. For many years he had suffered with weak lungs, and his constitution was not rugged enough to resist this, and the end came in peace on Saturday morning, January 11, 1908. Mr. Vanderspoor was born in South Holland, Netherlands, 68 years ago. At 17 years of age, he immigrated to this country, settling in Pella, Iowa. In 1883, he joined the new movement to South Dakota, coming to Harrison in the second group. And this, of course, we just heard from Mr. Vanderspoor, this in person, and so this is restating his life. 7 years ago, he retired from active life, but his retirement was for self-improvement, for he spent a good deal of his time reading and thinking. In his death, the community loses a citizen known for his honesty and integrity and fidelity to whatever he engaged to do. He was also deeply interested in affairs of the church, having been the secretary of the Reformed Church Sunday School for almost 25 years, and for the past 4 years serving as elder. He was most conscientious in his application to the duties of those offices, being painstaking in his work. When the Harrison Academy project was launched, he was one of the first to take an active interest in it. He was a member of the Board of Trustees of this institution. Funeral services were held on Monday afternoon in the Reformed Church of which he was a member. The Reverend Henry Starks conducted the funeral service in the Dutch language, and it was attended by many. The Reverend H. Vanderwerp also gave an address, followed by Professor J.B. Stedeke, who spoke in English. The consistory members acted as pallbearers. Mr. Vanderspoor's death is mourned by his sister Plenty Beckenbosch of Pella, Iowa, and the family of his brother-in-law, Church Brower, to whom he left his entire estate. And of course, I'd be curious to know how much that really all was.
Can you imagine that she suggested she should read my obituary before I read my part?
I was wondering who was going to be first, Dave.
Greetings. I'm Tjeerd Brouwer. I was born in 1835 in Friesland, Netherlands. I'm a couple of years older than Liebert van der Spoor, whom we just met. He is my brother-in-law. I came to America in 1855, as did the van der Spoors. Liebert and his family and my family all arrived in New York City in May 1855 aboard the SS Carolina. I was 20 years old. My mother had died in the Netherlands, so I came with my widowed father and 3 siblings, just older than me. We settled in Marion County, Iowa. When I was 29 years old, I married Nieltje van der Spoor, who was 19 at the time. I would like for you to meet her.
Greetings. I am Nieltje van der Spoor. I was born in 1845 in South Holland, the Netherlands. As Tjeerd said, we came to America on the same ship, and both our families settled in Pella. Besides father, my family included Liebert, who was 17 years old, our sister Plentje, who was 13, and me. I was 11 when we arrived in the New World. Life was certainly an adventure for us, but the unknown was also very scary. I married Tjeerd Brouwer in 1864, and we settled at Pella. We had some very happy years and some very sad years. We were busy for sure, because in the next 20 years, we became the parents of 11 children.
It was hard to make a living, so we always looked for something better. In 1871, we moved the family to Sioux County near Orange City, Iowa. But things weren't any better there, so 5 years later we moved back to Pella. We lived there until 1884, when Liebert told us about a great opportunity waiting for us in Douglas County. We began preparations to move once more.
Children, all you who are children.
I would like you to meet our family at the time we moved to Harrison. Okay. We have Weeby Brouwer, 17, John Brouwer, 15, Papa Brouwer, 14, Annie Brouwer, and she dies. And Henry Brouwer, 12, and he dies. Lucinda Brouwer, 8, and she dies. Then an unnamed child who also died that we don't know the name of the baby. And she dies. Sadie Brouwer, 7, and Paulina Brower, 4. Oh, Paulina is seated. And Hattie was 1 year old. And it was very hard burying our 5 children, and we left Pella with heavy hearts. We set out with many others in the summer of 1884 for the new territory, traveling by covered wagon. And my dear brother welcomed us to his home and made room for all of us, 8 of us. Yes, it was quite crowded, but we managed. We mourned greatly for the 5 children we lost, but God blessed us with 2 more daughters. Their names are Katie Brower, who became Mrs. Dewey Postma, and Anna Brower, who became Mrs. Charlie Zone.
A year later, we were able to get land farther west, a mile east of New Holland, where we built a house. The rocks are still visible there where the house stood, in what is now known as today Larry and Father Vanderley's pasture. We lived there many years, but after Liebert moved to Harrison to live with Mr. C. Vandenbos, we moved into his place. When Liebert died in 1908, he willed everything he owned to our family, including the 2 quarters of land. Our boys continued to farm the land for many years to come.
How much is 2 quarters? Half a square? Half a section.
Yeah, okay.
640.
Two squares. That's a lot of land. That's a lot of land. Yeah. That's actually the same amount of land today as it was back then. The land doesn't change.
And, wait, I'm thinking about and of every, well, we use the metric system.
Every township, 6 townships, 1 quarter devoted to education. It was the school section. School section, education in that 6x6 township.
And who forced that to happen? The government? Who made that happen?
Who made the regulation about the 6 number 4 education section?
It started in the Northwest in 1787. Continued after the Louisiana
Hello, I am Ritsky Wolbrink. I was born in 1842 in Holland, Friesland, in the Netherlands. My parents were Gerrit and Tritja van Tieren Wolbrink. My parents really were from Gelderland, but they moved to Friesland before I was born because it was where they found work. That is why you might say the Wolbrink name is not Fries. What does the Wolbrink name mean? The first part, wall, refers to the wool of sheep, and brink means market square. So Wolbrink means the wool marketplace. Gelderland, where they were from, is a province of lush, green grass where many sheep are raised. When I was 33 years old, I met and married the love of my life, Jenny Sturr, my first wife. She was age 31 when we were married. Here is Jenny now. Hi, Jenny. The following year, Jenny gave birth to our precious baby girl. Right here. But the joy was short-lived. Jenny died 2 days after she gave birth. Baby Jenny fought for her life, but died when she was only 19 days old. Now I was alone again. But life goes on, and 2 years later, I married Tricia Stott. My mother's name was also Tricia. Here is Tricia now.
Hello. Yes, my name is Tricia Stott. I was born in 1853 in Holland, Friesland, like Witzka. I came into our marriage with my son, Jacob, who was 3 years old at the time. Jacob's father's name is Louis Peters Bacher. He lived in the Jewish home where I worked at the time. Jacob and I lived with my parents. After I met Ritzka and we were married, Jacob continued to live with them. In the next few years, Ritzka and I became the parents of 3 children, Garrett, John, and a second baby named Jenny.
In 1882, our house and attached barn burned to the ground. The loss was such that we could not rebuild. To start anew would mean a much lower social standing. So we decided to leave Holland and go to America. Yes, Jacob came with us too, even though I was not in favor of it at the time. In the spring of 1883, we went to Amsterdam and boarded a ship, the Zaandam, and left everything familiar. We were on the ship with 683 adults, 118 children ages 1 to 8, and 44 babies. There were also 21 saloon passengers, which are the first class passengers, for a total of 866 people coming to the New World.
It was so hard to say goodbye to our family in Holland, knowing we'd never see them again. When we left, Ritzka was age 40, I was 30, Jacob 8, Garrett was 4, John 2, and Jenny was 6 months. It was a hard trip on the water. Many people became sick and some died. Death came to our sweet baby Jenny. Watching her little body being thrown overboard into the sea was one of the hardest things we ever had to do. Now, Ritzka's second daughter, named Jenny, had died too.
We arrived in America on May 26, 1883. After being processed in New York Harbor, we made our way to Boynton, Iowa, to where my older brother Yinsta and his wife Zika lived. Yinsta was called John in America.
John and Zika's house was already full with 5 children, but it was fuller yet when our family of 5 moved in. It was while we were living there that John convinced Ritzka it was time that Jacob started calling him Dad or Pa instead of Uncle. So from then on, Jacob became a Wolbrink, and many people in Douglas County never knew any different.
In the late summer of 1884, I moved my family to Harrison. I'd heard it was a land of opportunity. When we arrived, all the land close to town was already taken. We found a place with a shanty somewhere else, someone else had abandoned 6 miles northwest of Harrison. But it proved too late in the season, and we were not yet ready for winter when it hit. We suffered much cold and hunger that first year. Yes, Tricia shed many tears the first winter. In time, I was able to get 360 acres of land through the Homestead Act. I built a larger dwelling for us to live in, but with our growing family, it was soon too small as well.
After 6 years in America, our family now numbered 8. I would like you to meet our children. Just say the name. Jacob is now 14, Garrett 10, John 8, and we named our next child Jenny after our daughter who had died on the ship. This is Jenny number 3, and she is 3 years old. Edith 1, and our new baby 3. 3 years later, we had another little girl whom we named Katie. We had a very sad occasion when Katie was 7 years old. The children were on their way home from school when some neighbor boys offered to give them a ride home. Well, they climbed into the bobsled, but there was a gun on the floor, and it accidentally discharged and hit Katie in the leg. No one knew how to tie the leg to stop the bleeding, and she bled to death. How our hearts ached for her.
In 1896, I built the first half of a new home.
What a luxury it seemed. There was enough room now for Jacob to come home on weekends. All week he lived with whomever he worked for. In 1898, we had one more baby and we named him Henry.
In 1910, Trenchot and I moved into Harrison. Henry was still in grade school for a couple more years. So he lived with us during the school year, but lived with his siblings on the farm in the summertime. He lived in the house I built for the rest of his life, and his children continued to live there until 2007.
Hello, I am Jacob Staub Wolbrink. I was born on May 4, 1875 in Holland, Friesland, the Netherlands. My mother is Trinchy Staub. You just met her. The name of my father, as recorded in the courthouse in Holland, is Louis Peters Bakker, but I never knew him. My mother was working in the Bakker home, a Jewish family, when she became pregnant. After I was born, my mother and I lived with her parents, Jacob and Lipsy DeVries Staub. Yes, I was named Jacob after my grandpa Staub. My mother married Ritsky Garrett Wolbrink when I was 3 years old. She moved to his house, but I continued to live with my grandparents. My best friend was my Uncle Sixty, who was my mother's youngest brother. He was 9 years older than me. In early 1883, a fire consumed their house and barn, and they lost everything they owned. So Ritsky decided to leave the Netherlands and start over in America. He did not want to take me with him, maybe because he had 3 other children by this point. I felt very unwanted. But finally, Mother convinced Ritsky that I had to come with them. My grandparents were already in their 70s, so getting up there in years. When we boarded our ship, the Zandam in Amsterdam, I was 8 years old. We had 2 trunks with us that contained all our earthly possessions. We landed in New York Harbor and made our way in time to Boyden, Iowa, where Uncle Ritsky's older brother John and his family lived. While living with them, Uncle John convinced Ritsky it was time to let me call him Pa instead of Uncle, as I had been doing. I don't know if I was ever legally adopted by him or just used the name and still do today. Later in the summer of 1884, Pa moved the family west to Douglas County. As he heard, there was land there was selling fast. The first winter, we lived in a shanty and were not prepared for snow. We were often hungry and cold. In the next 2 years, Pa got over 300 acres of land through the Homestead Act. Though we still lived in a shanty, it was now our own land. There were soon 8 of us, as 3 more daughters were born. When I was 14 years old, I overheard Pa tell Mom, "Jacob has got to go. There are too many mouths to feed." I was devastated. Where was I to go? But I had no choice. So I started working for neighbors, doing field work and carpentry, and living away from home. In 1896, Pa built the first piece of a new house for his still growing family. Henry was born 2 years later, but he never seemed like a brother to me because I was 23 years older. In the 1900 census, when I was 25 years old, I was listed as living with Frank and Annie Ripma and their children in Joubert, where I was working. Shortly after that, I was able to buy some land myself from Frank Bancourt, located in Aurora County, 2 miles west of Pa's land. Land was available because we'd just come through a severe drought and the grasshoppers ate whatever crops were left. Numerous families packed up and moved back east. From 1900 to 1903, I lived on a farm in a shanty that was abandoned by the bankers, while I built my own house and barn nearby. Then guess what happened in 1903? Yes, I married a very pretty and talented girl named Hattie Brower, who became the love of my life. We both attended the Reformed Church in Harrison. I would like you to meet her.
Greetings. I am Hattie Brower Wolbrink, your grandmother, or great-grandmother, or great-great-grandmother. I'm the daughter of Jared and Milcha Brower. You've heard the story of how I came to Harrison at 1 year old. My uncle, Libert Vanderspoor, had come the previous year, so his land was close to Harrison, and at first we lived with him. Harrison was rapidly growing and was by far the largest settlement for many miles around. In 1886, the population of Harrison was 200 people. I came here with my parents, 3 brothers and 2 sisters. Of course, I don't remember much of those early beginnings since I was so young. I did gain 2 more sisters after living here who became my playmates. As a child, I attended school in Harrison, and when I got older, I worked for a store in Joubert, which was also a busy trading area. And then I taught school for 2 years in Harrison before getting married to Jacob. Yes, Jacob asked me to marry him and come and live on his farm in Aurora County. He was 28, and I was 20 years old when we married on February 18, 1903. And hanging on the wall over there is my wedding dress. And you can see what a tiny person I was, particularly when I got married.
We were very blessed in the next 21 years. God gave us 10 wonderful and healthy children. Our first son, Richard, was born in 1904, and our last, Jacob Jr., in 1925. Hattie will share their names.
Yes, 10 children was a lot. The names of your parents and grandparents are, in order, Richard, Charles, William, Garrett, John, Nellie, finally a girl, Gideon, Katie, Sarah, and Jacob Jr. We named many of the children after relatives, as was the custom. People thought it showed much faith that we waited until the 7th son to name one after their father, Jacob. All the children attended the Fairview School, which was 1.75 miles north of the home place. Since Jacob suffered from a condition known as ulcers, the older boys were needed to help on the farm in the spring and the fall. They were not able to attend school the entire year. During the summer, when it was hot, the boys would drive the cows away from the pond and the pasture and go swimming. They were careful to keep their faces above the water because it was so dirty from the cows. When they got out, their bodies would be nearly black. But they said they got cooled off.
In 1916, we were able to enlarge our farm by purchasing another quarter of land to the north. I really did not like farming with horses, but I did enjoy it with machinery in later years. I liked being a carpenter better. You can imagine how busy we were on the farm. We had 10 children. Hattie had to break bread every other day. This was not easy on hot summer days because all the cooking and baking had to be done on a wood stove. In order to keep the kitchen heat out of the rest of the house, we would hang wet blankets in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room. It helped a little. When we got married, we continued to attend the Harrison Reformed Church. It had begun in the fall of 1882 when pioneers built a church of rough boards and sod. It was used for church on Sundays and as a schoolhouse during the week.
Since I grew up close to Harrison, it seemed like a big trip to go there by horse and buggy once I moved to Jacob's farm. But we made the trip often to trade cream and eggs for other essentials, as well as to go to church. But in 1914, the Aurora Center Reformed Church was started as a mission outreach of the Harrison Church. The church members in Aurora City tried very hard to get us to switch to their church. At that point, we had 6 children, and it sure would have been less distance to travel by horse and buggy or by the sled in the wintertime, but Jacob never agreed. His mother, Tricia, was now a widow and living in Harrison. He said that after church was the time for him to visit his mother. So while I taught Sunday school, Jacob took the children who weren't old enough for Sunday school to his mother's. We'd also visit my family, the Browers. They lived 1.5 miles west of town. Oh yes, I taught Sunday school for 20 years, and I got a gift at the end. I would like to show you this gift now. I received this sewing basket, and it came in very handy because I was a big sewer, and it came in very handy to keep my supplies.
Hattie and I lived together on the farm for 52 years. Yes, there were good years and lean years, but God was always with us. He not only gave us 10 wonderful children, but 10 wonderful sons and daughters-in-law as well. We would like you to meet them at this time.
Now they are all over there. Oh, there's William and Gertrude right now. Oh, okay, it's a perfect place. And that is Garrett and Agnes. Well, there's going to be a few other pictures thrown in here, I see. There's John and Marie. Never mind. Sorry, we don't have these right in order. Here is Richard and Nellie. That's Gideon and Lorraine. This is Charlie and Katie. Well, this technology is really amazing. Okay, go ahead. Okay, there they all are, all 20 of them. And there are our 10 children as adults. And our 10 children with their spouses. All right, now it's oldest to youngest. This is Richard with his wife Anna. This is Charles and, oh my gosh, Helen. Charles and Helen. William and Gertrude. Garrett and Agnes. John and Marie. Nellie and Richard. Gideon and Lorraine. Charlie and Katie. Orville and Sarah. And Jacob Jr. and Elva. Now, actually, if you'll stop a minute, we're going to.
We are also blessed by all of you.
All of you is 38 grandchildren, 95 great-grandchildren, and many more generations.
We are grateful that you remember and honor us by attending our Wolbrink reunions.
Now I left it on the windowsill.
Say, Harlan, when you stand up here with that side view, I was kind of glad you had your jeans on. I've seen guys wear those bibs without jeans underneath.
Way better than jeans on a hot day.
We're hoping that you're not tired yet and you still have some listening in you. We just have one more thing. And Sarah, I shared this with Sarah and she thought that I should read it. We'll try to make it through it. It's a story. I don't think I can do that. It's a story I wrote about Grandma Hattie Wolbrink, so I'll try to make it through. All right. This is a story about Hattie Wolbrink, my grandmother. She died when I was 7, but before she died, she saved my life. Did you hear that? She saved my life. Since our father, Gideon Wolbrink, was a pastor, we never lived in South Dakota, along with most of the rest of the clan. But we'd visit Grandpa and Grandma a couple times a year in the home place. And once, they visited us in North Dakota. Paul came home that day of the first grade with a V snipped directly out of the front of his hair. He'd done a little barber work with his scissors during what must have been a more boring part of learning his ABCs. Mother was not pleased. Going to visit our grandparents was way easier on her, since the farm was a magical place for 4 children who were growing up in town. We could explore the haymow and maybe find some kittens, or ride the pig outside the kitchen window. Or watch Uncle Junior milk the cows while the cats sat nearby, waiting for him to squirt some milk into their mouths. He had a deadly aim. And best, the windbreak. Those woods of wonder where we girls played house, using rusty milk cans for chairs, a leafy branch as a broom, and an old corn sheller to make our dinner. After our gourmet meal, we would drive to faraway places in the tireless Model, was it a Model T or a Model A? Let's say an A. In the tireless Model A that sat rusting nearby. And we never had to worry about the price of gas. I also loved Grandpa and Grandma's house. We slept upstairs, Mom and Dad in one bedroom, and us 4 kids in the other. The roosters woke us up in the morning, but it was a smell of bacon and eggs wafting up the stairs that made us get up and get dressed. Bacon and eggs is a smell I still associate with Grandma. Imagine how much time she spent in that tiny kitchen, cooking for Grandpa and 10 children. The only time I remember seeing her without an apron tied around her waist was when we went to church, or she was helping with milking chores, because she could milk a cow. And even though she only weighed about 100 pounds for her entire life, except when she was pregnant, she could carry buckets of milk from the barn to her kitchen like anyone else. Grandma kept pink depression glasses in her pantry. She placed framed photos of family members across the top of her upright piano in the parlor, a room where we children were not allowed to play. Her treadle sewing machine sat on the side porch, and from those windows, you looked out on her flower and vegetable garden, fenced to keep out the rabbits. For us kids, the best thing in the house was the built-in cupboard in the dining room, where Grandma kept games for her 38 grandchildren. We liked the stereoscope best. Its blurry double images merged to take us to 3D pagodas in China and to skyscrapers in New York City. Grandma died on Memorial Day, 1955. Her casket was brought to the house before the funeral, a custom that allowed families to say goodbye in private. 10 families and Pa gathered in the dining and living rooms. After Bible verses, hymns, and stories were shared, the grandchildren went up to the casket by family groups to say goodbye. When our turn came, Janie held up Martha so she could see her grandmother for the last time. Finally, here's my story about love. There were other buildings on the farm besides the house and barn. A corn crib, the outhouse, a shelter for the pigs, a tool shed, and a hen house. During one of our visits to the home place, Grandma asked if I wanted to gather eggs with her. I was 5. She gave me the basket, took my other hand, and we walked across the farmyard to the coop. She unlatched the hen house door. I stepped in and saw the row of laying boxes along the wall and some hens sitting on them. Hens were mean. I'd seen them peck at each other out in the yard. Grandma saw my fear and smiled. She walked over to the first hen and lifted it off its nest. I took off the eggs and I put them in the basket. We moved down the row working together, Grandma lifting off the hen and take out the eggs. When we finished, she took the basket in my hand. We walked back to the house together and she went on with her chores. That one moment became the touchstone of my life. During the bleakest times, when teenage depression overwhelmed me, or I was so lonely while living abroad and teaching that I wanted to quit, Grandma would be there, lifting the hens off the nest for me, one at a time. She'd smile, and I knew I could make it through. Thank you, Grandma. Never underestimate the power of one small act of love.
Thank you, Harriet. Adrian has an article that was written in the paper for Grandpa and Grandma's golden anniversary. So you want to, I guess, talk about it, or do you want to read part of it? Whatever you want to do, Adrian.
I think it has been here before, so I just happened to come across copies of it now. So it's the golden anniversary, rolling wedding anniversary, February 8, 1953 of Jacob Wolbrink's wedding. And it's got a newspaper article and then a poem that kind of summarizes the life of the family and the 10 children at that point. It happens to be that the poem was written by my mother. So we've got a little personal attachment with it, but we've got a few copies and available if anybody would like them. I'll put them over here and anybody can have them, or we can probably make more copies if we'd need more. So enjoy.
Read the poem. Adrian, read the poem.
Read it. They want to test.
What can I read? I heard that ice cream was going to start. It's a little bit lengthy, but if you want to be patient, okay. Mr. and Mrs. Jacob Wolbrink of Stickney observed their 50th wedding anniversary February 18, 1953. Mr. and Mrs. Wolbrink were honored in a special gathering of all their children, grandchildren, and other relatives and friends in the basement of parlors of First Reformed Church of Harrison. An appropriate program was presented. Numbers consisted of songs of praise and prayers of thanksgiving, besides many fond reminiscences of the past. Things going on about the same, don't they? That's great. Some lovely gifts were presented. A bounteous lunch was served. All 10 children were present and 27 of the 28 grandchildren. Many more friends came by during the open house to offer the couple their congratulations. The elderly couple is still living on their farm in Aurora County with their youngest son, Jacob Jr. They lived on the same farm during the entire 50 years. Mr. Wolbrink bought the land at the time and, being a carpenter, built the house and other farm buildings. In their younger days, Mr. and Mrs. Wolbrink were both very active in church and community work. They are still enjoying reasonable good health. So then the poem, in honor of Pa and Ma. When Jacob was a little boy, on the nights of Holland he played with joy. When 8 years old, he sailed the sea, a citizen of the United States to be. A little girl named Hattie Brower in Marion County, Iowa, was a flower. In a covered wagon to Dakota she came. Parents, brothers, and sisters did the same. When Hattie was big, she worked in a store. She sold the goods and swept the floor. One day, Jacob came to buy some candy. He thought the new clerk was pretty handy. This man and maid exchanged a greeting, and Sunday night went to CE meeting. Horse and buggy was the means of travel. The roads were dirt or mud and not gravel. Now Jacob had used the hammer and square and built some very fine houses here and there. One day he looked over a quarter section of land and said to himself, "I'll take command. This land is really a nice location. I'd like to make it my habitation." So on a hill he planted a tree and built a house with rooms just 3. Hattie had consented Jacob's wives to be. The wedding day was February 18, 1903. The young folks said, "We'll chivalry." They were all so happy, don't you see? In the group were several boys who planned to make just lots of noise. Across the new roof they dragged a log chain. It made more noise than any rain. So this handsome young couple, they settled down and were friends to all in country and town. One day to this home came a little boy. His name is Richard, their pride and joy. Then came Charles, sweet William, and Garrett. With 4 little chatters, there was no need for a parrot. The fifth little child was also a son. They did not think long. His name was John. And then arrived a darling girl. Her name was Nellie, and she had a curl. The seventh child was another brother. Gideon was good, so a little more brother. Katie and Sarah were two little sisters. Unlike the boys, in church they were twisters. A few years later, there was one baby more. For want of a name, he was called Jacob Jr. Mom cared for the children and scrubbed the floor. Pa worked in the fields to keep the wolf from the door. As the family grew, the house grew too. Pa neatly would add a room or two. Each child had his work and each had his day, play. For all of them was many a happy day. There was order and fun around the table. Garrett would eat potatoes more than William was able. To town and to church it was quite far, so Pa he bought a Flanders car. Pete and Bill on Sunday had a rest. Also Frank and Fanny had done their best. On the Flanders car, that carbide light didn't shine very far in a dark night. A few little hills it did climb in high, but sometimes the fence post did not fly by. The Flanders was traded for a Studebaker. It was a splendid 7-person taker. Since 1917, there has been no better maker. So Pa always trades for another Studebaker. Now all the children from your nest have flown to various places to make homes of their own, excepting Junior, who is doing his best to make their declining years the happiest. And now, dear folks, before we end, you have been a blessing to many a friend. You are blessed with 10 children and 28 grandchildren in accord, your family you raised in the fear of the Lord. When the weather was fair or when it was cool, Ma taught her class in Sunday school. Pa served his place in Harrison Consistory. Thus you have reached your golden anniversary. Now the children are grown, they covet your prayers for your journey in life, its joy and its cares. You are a blessing to them, they are a blessing to you. So we help one another as we journey through. May God bless us today as in the past, as all cares on the Savior we cast. In the ways of the world, may none of us roam, but be gathered together in our heavenly home.
Thank you, Adrian. Looking at the clock, about a week ago, we were preparing to go to Platt to attend Kendall's wedding. Kendall here has been married about 2 hours short of a week. Let's congratulate Kendall. Karen has something she would like to talk about at this time.
I've said this many a times when we've been at family reunions, but when we get together, you all have memories of Grandpa and Grandma, or at least most of you remember Grandpa. Phyllis and I, we don't have those memories, but we have lots of other fantastic memories because all the uncles and aunts became like grandparents to us. And so we probably have special memories in different ways. But, you know, they all frequently came to visit, still, even if Grandpa and Grandma weren't there, they came to our place. And some of them, 3 of them that lived at a distance would periodically, they'd stay overnight by us once in a while. And we have lots of great memories, but once in a while they would come with little gifts for us. And I don't know if Adrian or Ruth or David remember these, or if you have any of these, but one time when William and Gertrude came to our place, it was close to my birthday, which is in June, so I was maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 years old, and he brought one of these along for me. You guys have these?
The next generation remembers them.
You guys remember?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have one of these, Daniel?
I remember him.
Well, I would like you to have it. And I don't know, this is really pretty unique because, I mean, you guys all know how tops work. And this is just balanced just perfectly and it'll spin for a couple minutes and not stop. So this was one thing I have of him, and I also remember his styrofoam cutter. When we went to go visit them in Ackley, that was the coolest thing. When I burn the garbage, if I smell styrofoam cups burn, I still think of that thing. Because it had a very unique smell, and I'm sure it stunk up the house. But
And I have it, and I'll bring it next time.
you have it?
I have it.
That thing is cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
I burned my finger on it.
I think I probably did too. They were in,
Touched the wire.
I'm pretty sure they were in Ackley when we played with it.
We had SDEA.
Yeah, we'd have a break in the fall from school, and then we'd go on a road trip, and it was a big deal because we.
It made it to Spencer, too. Yeah. It was in Spencer,
Was
too.
it?
Yep.
Okay.
Do you by any chance have one of the rubber band guns that Grandpa used to make?
No, I
Remember
don't.
those? He cut up an inner tube, a car tire inner tube into strips, and then he'd come out and help us screw and glue it together and put a clothespin in the back of it.
That sounds dangerous. It
That
was funny.
that was the point.
Anyway, I think we should spin this thing. You're not all going to be able to see it in the back, but
One of our grandchildren might be able to do it because we have one at home and they were playing with it here just a couple months ago.
anyway, I could go down the list and give great memories of all of them. It's from ice cream shakes with Uncle Garrett at Connie's shop or Connie's Cafe to all the bubble gum or the Friedent gum at Richard and Nellie to drinking out of the cup that hung in the windmill by John and Marie. It goes on and on. But everybody's got memories. But anyway, that's what I wanted to share.
Mike, do you have something else to talk about yet with, oh yeah, you do, with the pictures or slideshow about presenting?
Yeah, just briefly, when I was visiting with Merlin about getting information and pictures and the slideshow and presentation and things together for this, we just did a little bit of talking and we started to collect just a few of the photos that are out there. We started to think about, okay, well, wouldn't it be nice if we could have a lot of these and put them up in the cloud. Mom, that means servers that are out there now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so what we did was we have a file repository out there, and we've got 56 photos out there already. We can go to 500, and then I'll just get more storage. But the way that it works is, unlike a place where you have to have a password, you can just go add them in, and then you can download the whole group of them. And there's no cost to that for you guys whatsoever. And so if you go to, and here's something else we did, if you go to wolbrinkreunion.com, that forwards you to this big bunch of photos. So if you have photos, take them and drop them in there, and then everybody can see them. All we ask is that when you drop them in, you label them so we know who it is. Okay? And we can just build that up and go from there. But wolbrinkreunion.com, and then you can see that, and that's what's playing in the slideshow off here on the side. And you can add them and then just download the whole group.
I've already had my share of time on the mic, but I've brought a lot of printouts from my genealogical program. I don't want to take all of that home. A little bit of it, some of these things I want to take home. So I'm going to kind of hang out over there. Please come, pick up, have. I printed them out to pass out. On the wall is the big chart. I was so pleased with my friend that was able to print that for me that I asked him for 3. So I want to take one of them home, but 2 of you should take them home too. So come and get that stuff, and our car will get about 1 mile an hour better mileage on the way home.
Well, I think we've come to the end of our program. So let's thank again the history. Okay. So, well, thank you, Harriet. You want to talk to Sarah? Yeah, that's too bad, Paul.
You have to know how amazing Sarah is. She really started thinking about this 5 years ago and has been off and on working on it. She has put enormous hours into it. I mean, I helped out a little bit at the end because I did some editing, but she's the one who really took it over. And the costumes were her idea, and all of the dolls and everything was her idea. So she needs at least 2 more rounds of applause.
This is one of those little stories that probably only one of you know what this is about. It happened on July 14, 1952. And Uncle William and Aunt Gertrude were visiting at Pa-Ma. And so Adrian was at our house. You remember that, Adrian?
Oh, yeah.
There he is, yes. Okay, so we were coming to the end of the day, and Adrian was at our house, but I took him back to Grandpa and Grandma on the bicycle, and when we got up on the grade, the old timers know what that is, but got up on the grade, and then there was a pickup beside us. It was John and Jenny Dykstra. I knew who they were, but I don't know what his issue was, but he hollered at, too far, okay, but he hollered at us to get out of the way. And I don't know what his, as I say, I don't know what his issue is or was, but Adrian got scared, hopped off the bicycle, and ran all the way to Grandpa and Grandma's place. I think he could have set a record that day for running. And I cried all the way home because I didn't get to say goodbye to Adrian.
Well, I think we've come to the end, except for maybe some pictures yet, if we need to do that, except we need to have a future plan. We want to do this again in 3 years. That was the normal rotation. It got to be 5 this last time. So, want to go back to 3 again?